Okay, welcome back, everybody, to part 2 of Bitcoin Hard Talk, episode 84, where we're going to be going through the macro side this week in macro and how it relates to the public humiliation ritual and the real battle between America's richest person and the president of the United States, and some of the blackmail operations at the deep state, like Jeffrey Epstein, its connection to many of the geopolitical wars that are happening right now, and also the companies that are building the social credit score for everyday Americans, which is going to be 10 times worse than what's happening in China right now. How does that relate to macro? Everything's coming together. Everything's falling together. If you haven't watched part 1 of This Week in Bitcoin, I recommend you head over there so you understand how to protect yourself. But right now, in this world of Bitcoin AI and CBDCs that we're transitioning to, this is part 2, This Week in Macro. Right. So if you've watched previous episodes, you'll know that I've been talking about these destabilization campaigns. And I talked about and released a video around, how you manufacture civil unrest in order to destabilize so you can change laws. And then you can use those law changes in order to usher in the legal changes that are needed for a surveillance state. And much of that is happening right now. So make sure you're aware of that as well. So I believe the U.S. destabilization campaign to push the world and America into a multipolar world order based upon America becoming a technocracy and backing their debt by newly issued stablecoins by the same technocratic stablecoin issuers that will be using the U.S. debt in order to roll over the Ponzi scheme and then earn the yield at the higher rates to buy more Bitcoin as they hedge and protect themselves in this multipolar world order. The destabilization campaign has been ratcheting up. Now, part of that is to take all of the institutions that made up the deep state in America and all of the institutions and call into question everything. I believe that this was done at the proof of weapons network level. You can go back to previous videos on my YouTube channel and look at understanding the proof of weapons network. It is a network of multinational global institutions, financial, technology, military, consumption, pharma, that are all consolidated together into asset managers, being the largest shareholders and board seats like BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, that are able to influence capital flows in order to utilize some of the companies that control the deep state, like the military industrial complex and banking companies that own the shares in the Federal Reserve, so that they can use technology to push out influence in monetary policy across the central banks, fiscal policy across those like Treasury that are using BlackRock's technology, multinational organizations like the International Monetary Fund, the Bank for International Settlements, and the asset managers that are managing their funds using BlackRock's technology and being shareholders in each other. You're able to influence global capital. You're able to influence wars in order to strategically manage a portfolio for profit maximization, which has no consideration of what's in the national interest of a country or the people. And that is why we are, and you're able to use lobby money in order to take over control of Congress, prime ministers, senates, judicial process, influence that. Prime ministers, whatever the structure of your country is. Now, part of that destabilization campaign was tariff policy. What does this do? It makes small to medium-sized businesses go bankrupt and be acquired up to the large multinational corporations and BlackRock portfolio companies. Same at the export-driven countries. At the individual level, through higher prices, that leads to an inflationary effect. And then it also makes it where capital outflows strategically lowers the dollar. And so the dollar DXY is below that $100 level, increases the cost at the 10-year and 30-year to borrow, which is good for the backing of the stablecoin issuers that we covered in part 1. And then you can try and refinance the debt, but you get capital outflows where people sell their treasuries or countries sell their treasuries, like China, Japan, and then they buy their own currency, which weakens the dollar relative to other currencies. The inflation decreases the purchasing power of everyday Americans, transfers wealth from Main Street to Wall Street and large multinational corporations, which is exactly what's happening right now as a result of the tariff policy. And then it draws capital where organizations like BlackRock are investing in BRICS and GCC regions and this multipolar world order. And you can basically use war in order to make a lot more profit for various countries and weaken the regions to optimize your portfolio. So part of that is to always create pump and dump screens for the hedge funds and just create chaos. And Trump is manufacturing chaos. And so what did we have to manufacture chaos this week? Well, steel and aluminum. As a British person, we call it aluminium. Americans call it aluminum. They took the tariffs up to 50% from 25%. The U.S. Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, the one that used to work for George Soros in order to make the $3 billion profit that was made for the George Soros Investment Fund by trading against the Bank of England and crashing the pound. He started to accuse China of holding back certain products that are essential for all U.S. industry supply chains. And so this calls into question, this creates, this calls into question, weakens the market, more capital outflows, more purchases of foreign currencies, more decrease in the value of the US dollar, and more overperformance by alternative stock markets. As you have this repatriation of capital and you reset the world order. Trump and President Xi Jinping, the president of China, they held their phone call conversation this week, and they were going to be discussing trades. That created a pump cycle in the market this week, and they didn't really give much updates. So there's no real updates from the call today, just general language in order to make more pump and dump cycles. On the Japan side, an essential part of the proof of weapons network, the Bank of Japan said that their economy can handle the impact of US tariffs. Now, Japan has a massive trade surplus and almost 230, I can't remember, 230 or 260% debt to GDP. And it is essentially a zero interest environment. And they are having their interest rates increase, which broke the carry trade. But this is repatriation of capital back to America. And this is a strengthening of the Japanese won relative to the US dollar as well, which makes up some of that basket of currencies in the index DXY as well. Now, this week we did see the yield on the 10-year and 30-year Treasury come down a bit. So the market liked this news. It came back slightly. And so you have to make more. This is a positive campaign on this side, which you can ruffle up with more negative campaigns. Eventually, volatility dries up as the market becomes more neutral to the manipulation. But they do have a massive trade surplus. And so we shall see. I covered in previous videos, if you want to understand the relationship between US and Japan, I did the US and Japan debt-based Ponzi scheme and how those relate to each other. But it's looking more like that Japan is dumping more and more US treasuries, which is what's leading to this strengthening of currency as nationalism in America leads to nationalism everywhere. And so the desired impact. But remember, you cannot solve America's debt-based Ponzi scheme with tax reform. You have to do it with monetary reform. And there is no indication of monetary reform. In fact, the opposite, rolling over the debt-based Ponzi scheme. And that was the opposite of the promise of what tariffs were originally meant to do in the first place. And so hopefully more and more people are waking up to that. Bitcoin Hard Talk, from day one, we prepared you for that. We were getting everyone ready for Liberation Day. on April the 2nd. And I was getting everybody, I was the one that said what the three main impacts of these tariffs would be. And so far, it has turned out to be exactly that. While everyone was confused, because I follow the money at the top level rather than listening to the politicians and listening to the media, which is the opposite of what always happens. But even if they Japan decoupled from the US, basically the hedge funds will still need, the hedge funds will still need a way of, they will undo that trade, and America will still need a monetary reform because it can't have the desired impact unless you just roll over and increase the debt as well. Now, this is the really interesting thing, and we'll be covering more around the public fight between Elon and Trump so you understand it. But at the same time, just before we go through that, there were conflicting messages around jobs. And jobs is often manipulated where they publish certain numbers as forecasts, and when the real ones come out, they publish that number, which looks better than expected, and then they have to adjust it later because they overpump those job numbers. So again, this is strategic weakening. You can't trust the data anymore. But at the same time, many of the corporations at the micro level were announcing layoffs. So Disney is set to, they've had lots and lots of layoffs, but they announced hundreds of employees that are going to be laid off. Now, I'm interpreting that as an artificial intelligence play. I mean, if you look at what Google AI has been releasing, you can make a Hollywood level production or even a Disney animation with commands right now. And that's only going to get better and better and better. This is the equivalent. Disney is like the blockbuster. And they only keep it in the portfolio so that they can manipulate narratives through Disney. And it's kind of like a mind control game as well for certain agendas. Hollywood has always been that. And so when Trump announced tariffs on Hollywood, this is strategic weakening as well of certain of the key soft power assets. Disney is one of those such companies. But you can make the equivalent of a Disney movie or animation for free very soon, if not already. And you can have agents working on distribution channels. This is how disruptive this technology is. And this is why all countries are going in on their adjustment to the AI strategy as well. Microsoft, they made a further announcement. They said that they're cutting hundreds more jobs. This is just weeks after they cut 6,000 jobs. And I think this is mainly around developer jobs as well. And so developer jobs seem to be going at the lower level. Artificial intelligence is making it possible for anybody to do vibes and command-based coding as well. And agents are getting more and more proficient at roles that used to be done by developers. So the wage rate for developers is shrinking. And if they're not willing to accept it, jobs are going, and they're hiring many of these Indian H-1B visas in the case of America, and the same trends in other countries like UK in order to build a new team to replace those jobs as well. Times are really changing fast. If you're not adjusting to a world of Bitcoin, AI, and CBDCs, then you really are running out of time in order to make these adjustments. You should be meeting with your family. You should be treating your whole family as a unit, and you should be coming up with a strategy. If you're too old to be in this game, then you need to be working with the younger generations. If you're not the technically literate person, then rather than going to university and spending 3 years on skills that will be completely inappropriate, that were funded to make economists debt dealers for bankers anyway, and doctors, drug dealers for big pharma anyway, because research is funded and we've got protests across these colleges because people don't want their money going to these alternative agendas and defunding campaigns. And now they're using that to change the First Amendment to say you're a terrorist if you support these different agendas, so that they can basically call you the terrorist whenever they want to weaponize it against you, and usher in this surveillance state that everything's moving towards, that they beta tested in the UK. If you're not adjusting to this right now, you are denying reality. You must be making adjustments. You must come up with plans. You've got the opportunity to lean in to the fact that artificial intelligence is here. Make sure you earn as much fiat currency as possible. Make sure you boycott that fiat currency from the Federal Reserve System by staving it in Bitcoin, so that you can build economic and sovereign power by outperforming historically. Can't promise the future. That if it happens again, just like Trump is doing for himself, not his country, just like BlackRock is doing for the banks, then you should be following the money, not what they're saying. Because you're able to, save in Bitcoin, and don't own it with BlackRock if you can avoid that, so that you can then, rather than make BlackRock richer, you can boycott BlackRock, and then you can have your own sovereign power as well by owning it in self-custody. But anyway, some of the numbers came out. There was a huge ADP, which is the automatic data. Let me make sure I get that. Automatic data processing data, and they came out with their jobs, and they predict the jobs, and then they missed it significantly. But there was more data today that did the exact opposite. So very conflicting message. But with the print on the actuals, they only had 36,000 private payrolls were added this month versus a projected 114,000 expected jobs. So that's a big miss. But again, the data that came out this week was the conflicting, and then maybe next week they'll reprint it and adjust it accordingly. But that's according to that data, and we can't trust it, but that is a big slowdown in hiring. This is early signs that the US labor market may be, slowing down fast, but we had speeding up with the data today. So you have to go a little bit deeper and look into the sectors. Haven't done that analysis, might do it in the future. Leave in the comments below if you'd like to see stuff. But my guess is this really is the adjustment to the AI, the artificial intelligence agents are starting to have hiring freezes and new teams being built in order to replace old people. And eventually that goes into robotics. So you got this window of opportunity as we transition to this world of Bitcoin, AI, and central bank digital currencies. And you need to make sure you're not on the universal basic income with no freedom on a central bank digital currency. So I still don't believe that at the next Federal Reserve cut, when the FOMC meeting the FOMC meet, I don't think you're going to get a rate cut. I don't believe that that's going to happen. And whether we get quantitative easing, what triggers that? There's obviously a lot of drama in the destabilization campaign where Trump is kind of having these public fights with Jerome Powell. Trump and Jerome Powell are both middle management for the banks. The banks are the shareholders in the Federal Reserve. They are the ones that make the decisions with their board and the FOMC. And then the chairman, Jerome Powell, is the one that reads out the script. And Trump, the same. He raises money and raises capital and is allowed to be president by pleasing the corporate backers that control the lobbies and control what is needed in order to ruin a career. And Trump gets to make a lot of money by aligning his interest with the corporates. He doesn't really, he doesn't need the vote. This is just because the corporates control the media. And so therefore you can influence all of those processes. Even with those numbers, I don't think we're going to see rate cuts anyway. So that's the prediction. And Trump is pushing for 100 basis points and looking for a 1%. And so when it doesn't happen, you can have this public fight when really, this is theater if you've been watching Bitcoin Hard Talk and when we go through some of these talks as well. Now, Trump publicly came out and aligned with one of those nodes, those politicians, Elizabeth Warren, that works for the banking lobby, that was an essential part of Operation Choke Point 2.0 under the Biden administration. They both basically serve the same banks because Trump is more aligned with the banking lobby than military lobby. Biden was more aligned with the military lobby. That's why you had a slightly different policy. But remember, this whole conversation around paying off the debt, the banks are who sets the policy. And the banks, they hold about $10 trillion in the US debt. That lobby has no interest in ever changing the amount of debt. They don't want that ever to be repaid. It's always rolled over. And so even stating that the debt can be repaid is just a psyop in itself. It can't be repaid. Unless you reform money, the dollar is debt, and debt requires interest to be repaid. And because that interest doesn't exist, you have to create an environment where more people are willing to buy those bonds, lend to corporations, so that you can borrow from the bank, create more money in a debt-based Ponzi scheme. It can't be repaid. So all of this is theater or ignorance. But it is a debt-based Ponzi scheme. That is the construct of the dollar. And Trump is proposing to abolish the debt ceiling, basically altogether, because Trump is a debt broker for the banks, and so is Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary. What did he come out with on some of his public Truth Social posts? He said, "I agree with Senator Warren." This is what Trump was saying. "The debt limit should be entirely scrapped." So Elizabeth Warren from the bank lobby and Trump, funded by the bank lobby, his largest contributor for the campaign was the Bell banking dynasty. If successful, this would remove basically Congress's obligation to vote on whether you should raise the debt ceiling. Now, this is paving the way for essentially unlimited borrowing. Now, it may come up with a $5 trillion cap, which allows the Trump administration to go beyond $40 trillion without having to get any accountability towards it. But this is the type of policy that they're looking to squeeze in these decisions around the big, beautiful bill as well. Now, this is great if you are a stablecoin issuer, as I covered in part 1, which World Liberty Financial is, which is Steve Witkoff and the Trump family as well, via their children and their family trust interests. And so they are looking to move really, really fast to essentially break things and try and get this big, beautiful bill through. The more that you break things, the more the stablecoin issuer benefits. So remember, the U.S. national debt is actually a tool for those that control America, the banks, to be able to control, because those that are lending the money are able to exert that influence, and they'll be able to receive the yield. And whenever they issue a mortgage, they're able to create that money out of thin air using the bond and the debt as a backing, as collateral, and create trillions and trillions of dollars of mortgage loans and mortgage-backed securities that the investment bank is then able to securitize so that they can sell to asset managers like BlackRock that's managing your money so that they get more control. And they've created this stateless entity that controls America and controls Europe and controls UK and is not accountable to any force. It's like a Dutch East India Company. And that's why the politicians don't work for you. They work for them. It's the debt is a national matter because you, the people, you pay for it. You pay for it through inflation. You pay for it through wealth inequality. And you pay for it through having to hand over money management to organizations like BlackRock so they can take your share voting rights and they can manage it on your behalf. And so this is a tool of influence. The national debt is built in. They can then lobby in order to get the national debt over to corrupt contracts like the big, beautiful bill. It's basically the citizens' responsibility to take care of the national debt, which is why you have all of that wealth inequality and civil unrest when it goes to the extreme like it is right now. And then they change laws in order to usher in a surveillance state so you can't protest. So the proof of weapons network that I've covered, they are the ones that thrive on this government debt. And so while citizens basically drown in, basically the hidden tax called inflation, and while less and less money is used for public services, that creates more and more civil unrest, more and more wealth redistribution. And so that is factored into the equation when you run a debt-based Ponzi scheme. And then people are like, why am I broke? Why is no one fixing the potholes in the streets? Why is no one looking after the homeless? Why is there crime everywhere? Why is there mental illness and no help for veterans? Why are they addicted to drugs? Why is there all of these things happening? Why is there no bridges that are falling? Why is there infrastructure investments that aren't happening? Because they no longer control and the government no longer works for you. So basically, Trump coming along and saying that he's going to pay off the national debt, it was essentially be like an asset manager dumping cash into the jump bond market with no yield. It ain't ever going to happen. You're not going to buy bonds that pay no yield and just give cash to corporations so that they can make the money. So paying off the debt has always been a lie. And anybody that says it without a monetary reform is just playing in theatrics as well, or ignorance. It will never happen. The proof of weapons network, with currently BlackRock as CEO, as the most important asset manager, who holds shares in all of the different banks, all of the different military companies, and of course, $10 trillion in bonds, is profiting from chaos, not fixing chaos, because the technology companies can then come along and fix the problem of chaos. And so Trump isn't here to fix America. Trump is here to profit alongside the proof of weapons network, which has its he's basically a representative for the portfolio companies in negotiating deals that help them, not America. And that's what he was doing. I covered that in all of the Saudi trips when America, when I said Trump is selling off America and various other things. The proof of weapons network isn't here to play savior in any way, shape, or form. In fact, they're quite the opposite. They're willing to create wars, they're willing to fund wars, and they're willing to create technology that creates, even in case of Gaza, genocide as a service, occupation as a service. These are all the beta tests. The surveillance state that's happening in Europe and UK. This is all money that you're paying inflation with that's recycled into the corporate contractors that is then used to bribe the politicians so that they work for you. The Constitution was to protect you in America from the tyranny of government, but it never protected you from the tyranny of corporations becoming more important than the government and the government working for those corporations. They're not accountable to anybody, which is why you see what you see. And then they need you distracted with believing that you need to change politicians instead. They work for profit. They don't work for philanthropy in any way, shape, or form. And it's nothing personal against you. It's just the way that it's systemically structured. They operate this way globally as well. They have no national agenda in any way, shape, or form. They treat basically every state just like it is a cash cow. And when the cash cow no longer bleeds what they want, they no longer care about the people. They just change the algorithm, change capital flows, and start to say, Europe, you can be a vassal state for European war. And they create narratives by funneling that money into non-governmental organizations, media control, and various other operations. So all that to say is, why did we have this public argument between Elon and Trump? And I've been thinking about it deeply. So let's get into that. In general, Elon is subservient. He's like one of the entrepreneurs, but got involved in politics. And so he is higher up on the proof of weapons network than Trump himself, because presidents are lower down in the power structure. you kind of had central banks, then intelligence agencies, then you have the corporations and the banks, and then you have government underneath. But technology is kind of changing that power play as military becomes, which controls the deep state, controls the CIA, creates these wars, pushes out these narratives. You know, and then the entrepreneurs that are wealthy, they get to contribute as a high net worth investor to some of the financial complex. But Musk also has technology because military gave him space exploration to have his SpaceX, social credit score with, you know, X and the algorithms that come from that, AI, XAI, Tesla data as well, driving data, and many, many different plays. So he sits in tech, and now military has become in tech. He sits in that bucket as well. And so he kind of sits in the middle of that. We know that Trump is more aligned with bank and finance as a real estate guy, real estate entrepreneur. And also that is, you know, comes across in many of the deals that he's personally benefiting on, pretending that it's MAGA. But let me just go through the sequence of events in case you missed them. I'm sure you watched them, but essentially, I'll pull out some of them. There was a lot more to it. There was a long space that I was on. If you're not following me on X, I do all the real-time updates there. But Elon tweeted after this big, beautiful bill. Now, remember, I covered it over the last couple of weeks that this is the opposite of the promise. This is the opposite of Doge. Doge gave the data to the AI algorithms. And there was way more for Palantir, the other side of the PayPal mafia, which is Peter Thiel, than Elon's side. Now, he got some stuff in this big, beautiful bill, but this was a very hard one to read because I didn't predict that Elon would create this carnage based upon just following the money. So I think there's something else at play here. But anyway, Elon tweeted out, "I'm sorry, but I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong. You know it. It's basically a gift to corporations as usual, but Elon Musk, that has been working for Doge, which has only been able to save 100 billion, you know, ended up going to the White House. He got the key, and then they were all buddy. They were pretending that everything's all good. He didn't get the humiliation ritual because remember, everyone above Trump in terms of power doesn't get a humiliation ritual. Those below, he gives the humiliation ritual to. But it's basically, this bill was a gift to corporations, as I said. It's corrupt, it's theft from the American people, but it's business as usual. It's what a president is basically paid to do, and it's to prop up the debt-based Ponzi scheme, as usual. And it's to make sure that the dollar always has a way of refinancing and making sure those profits are stolen from the average American person that doesn't own those assets. And if they want to protect themselves, they have to own those assets, or they own Bitcoin, which beats the shit out of everything historically. Elon also came out and said that interest payments already consume 25% of U.S. government revenue, and that if these deficits continue, there will only be money for interest payments and nothing else. While that is true, that is the systemic design. You can't pay down the debt, and so nothing stops this train, as Lynn Alden has been saying. And so Trump does what he needs to do for banks and financial institutions. Elon doesn't like it. And so Trump posted that Musk was basically wearing thin, and that he asked him to leave. So Trump was saying, in typical fashion, he asked Elon to leave. He added to that as well that Musk went absolutely crazy after losing the electric vehicle mandate. And so he's claiming that there was no pork for the electric vehicles. There was pork for General Motors and traditional gas guzzling vehicles as well, and the energy play that comes from that. And so basically he was blaming it on that. that started to create a public spat where basically Musk proposed different things. He proposed creating a new political party to represent essentially the 80% in the middle, which is quite correct. What he is saying is all true. Now, that would require monetary reform, and that would require taking on the power structure of banks and financial institutions, which Trump is not doing. Trump is working with the banks and financial institutions, rolling it over to stable coins to personally enrich and using Bitcoin as that mechanism while investing in the multipolar world order in the GCC countries like Qatar, UAE, Saudi, and also taking out loans from the head of BRICS like China through ICBC and building Trump Towers with those loans. As I said, while he effectively shorts the dollar and goes long Bitcoin to implement destabilization campaigns. And this is another destabilization campaign. But I'm not sure if it was by design, by any way stretch of the imagination. Elon Musk then came out and says that the U.S. president is in the Epstein files, and that is the real reason why they have not been made public. Now, that's a bomb to those that don't know. Anybody that was following this under the Biden administration would know that certain parts of the Epstein files were already released. We covered that in Bitcoin Hard Talk. And there were lots of mentions of Trump's business relationship and his Mar-a-Lago and various other things. And there were pictures with Elon, with Ghislaine Maxwell, who's the partner of Jeffrey Epstein, that would groom these girls, create these blackmail rings, film in order to blackmail very famous people or influential people like banks and banksters. And many of those banks and banksters like JP Morgan and Jamie Dimon settled directly with those victims that were involved because JP Morgan was the bank that was used, as well as why they wiped out Lehman Brothers back in the day and various other, when you follow the money and see these blackmail rings, because Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, who suddenly was taken out, was a Mossad agent deeply connected to Israel, the weapons trafficking rings. If you read the book by Whitney Webb, One Nation Under Blackmail, you'll learn a lot more. Follow some of Ryan Dawson's content. And he goes through in detail all of these different operations, who's involved, and even created a t-shirt and a map with the Epstein list by interviewing victims, reverse engineering various documents. So most of it is already known. And spoiler alert, it doesn't contain too many celebrities. It's got the royal family like Prince Andrew and various other ones, but it's mainly the banks and the different weapons trafficking networks and people behind the scenes and FBI agents and that type of stuff. To give you like a little bit of background, we've covered that just to give you so that then I can see where does this go and how does it try to macro and how does it get into the big bill as well. In 2002, basically New York Magazine quoted, I'll give you some of this, way more detail in Whitney Webb's book. But there was a quote where Trump essentially described Jeffrey Epstein. Now, this is a public quote. If you've been following documentaries, you'll know this already. And so this wasn't new information that he was releasing. If you remember, when Elon first acquired X, he released all of those different Twitter files and Epstein files. And this was during the Biden administration. And we were covering, those live as well and the different things that came from that on X Spaces. But it was basically the famous Trump quote that maybe people just didn't know about it, maybe because the largest account on X publishes it, and then that creates traditional media covering it as well. This gets mainstream attention to things that some people may not have known. But Trump described Epstein as a terrific guy, and he described him as somebody that likes beautiful women, and particularly on the younger side as well. And he was continuing to do business deals, even though this was known. Look, I've seen no evidence that Trump engaged in anything like, sexual activities with underage people. But we don't have the full information. And Elon was basically saying, this is the reason we don't have the full information. He also posted a video that was already out in the sphere, It was in 1992, basically, Trump partied with Jeffrey Epstein in his Mar-a-Lago. And he said that basically he's just going to leave that here for people to watch. So bringing attention where he's partying with lots of women, speaking with Jeffrey Epstein. And these things are all known, as I said. So he didn't release anything new, which means that it probably won't lead to a lawsuit. He's just bringing attention to public information and things that are already there. But after that bombshell, he also went and called for a U.S. President Trump to be impeached, essentially, and replaced with J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance, as you know, he's deep state. He was funded by Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel, Palantir. Palantir was funded by the CIA venture capital Silicon Valley wing in order to create artificial intelligence technology that has been used to create, genocide as a service, occupation as a service, surveillance in Europe, and also other types of technologies, even used in places like Saudi Arabia right now for managing Hajj. Eid Mubarak, anybody that's celebrating Eid right now, they're using artificial intelligence for legitimate reasons as well. And so, but it's all producing this data as well. So anyway, that's what we know about Elon and Trump in terms of the Trump files. There's more speculation on one nation under blackmail, but I don't think these, are the same extent to many of the implicated bankers and Jeffrey Epstein himself. So it's drawing attention to that anyway. And so Trump has never really publicly talked about it. So it either forces him to address it, which makes me think that this isn't just some smoke and mirrors campaign. This isn't just, some kind of engineered strategy or distraction campaign, personally. Now, to bring it to today, they were meant to have a call today. So they scheduled a call to kind of broker peace between the two. But the meeting was cancelled, and we're getting more and more narrative and more drama and more reaction around it. Just to complete the picture as well, Elon himself has been connected to Jeffrey Epstein as well. So this could also indirectly come through. But again, it's all public information. It's already that we know. And I don't think if there was more to find out, I don't think Elon would be pushing at this string. Basically, there were some legal proceedings connected to JP Morgan and Jamie Dimon. And there were phone conversations and text messages with Ghislaine Maxwell and Elon Musk as well. He's been basically denying any of the personal associations with that. But in 2023, the U.S. Virgin Islands, they issued a subpoena to Elon Musk. And as part of this lawsuit against JP Morgan Chase, they were requesting more information. And I personally believe that there were phone messages that were trying to entrap Elon between Ghislaine Maxwell and Elon's, emails that are designed to get him to reply. And then you could connect it to these photos with Ghislaine Maxwell in order to gain more power over Elon as part of this blackmail network for the deep state proof of weapons network, as part of Mossad, CIA, and how the military companies are able to use the intelligence network through MI5 as well in order to manufacture these wars for profits. That means that they can sit above these politicians and make sure that bills are only for the benefit and politicians' job is just to create a MAGA narrative or an acceptable narrative to make people think they work for them, and people are distracted, believing that they control through their vote the political process. Anyway, the British Virgin Island territory, they allege that Epstein may have referred or attempted to refer to Musk as a client of the bank. Refer Musk to a client of the bank. So apparently Epstein referred Musk. Whitney Webb, in her book and other public tweets, suggested that Epstein may have advised Musk, and it would have been more than just a referral. And there was advisory agreements based upon her research, or alleged ones, based upon the 2018 Tesla initiative in order to privatize Tesla. When there was that manipulation that led to the SEC case that didn't happen, that it remained a public company. And this was possibly involving funding from the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia. Those funds were invested in X in the end, when you follow the money, which is still a private company. And that's leading to much of these AI deals and various other things that the proof of weapons network, and leading to me to believe that we're transitioning to this multipolar world order that I've covered. So as I said, these Epstein files were released on X during the Biden administration anyway. We had significant information, nothing new here. There is a massive lack of transparency, and Elon's hinting that there is a lot more to be seen, and he would like the X files, the Epstein files, to be released. And he is saying as Trump and his involvement is the reason why they're not there. So he's drawing attention to that. And that would protect, this is the individuals that I know that were involved based upon the information and the research that I've done. Is that, as I said, it's not famous people, it's all banksters, and many attempts to implicate some of these more, famous people or famous entrepreneurs as well. Trump did have that relationship from the 1980s to the 2000s. And so that was a 20-year relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. When you are involved in property, massive real estate transactions in New York, you have to be connected to the right people. That means that many of the deep state, whether it's the Jewish mob, the Italian mafia, that's connected to CIA operations, some of the stuff that you would read about in Operation Gladio by Paul Williams, if you've read that book. But there were photographs taken throughout history around these events, and they've been used ever since as well, in Mar-a-Lago and various other things. In terms of Trump's involvement in 2002, there was that interview where Trump referred to Epstein as, the terrific guy, and the quote that was, shared by Epstein and his infatuation with beautiful women, showing that he knew that he liked women on the younger side. Apparently, according to the public records, Trump said that his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein ended in 2004. This was due to a real estate dispute with Jeffrey Epstein. So what does that mean? What is all this? Now, I could come to the conspiracy theories, and many people have, and ordinary I would normally do that. But I actually think that in this occasion, I don't become fanboys of anybody, but under this occasion, I think Elon is just a wild card. I don't think this was part of any agenda or plan. I think this was Elon acting in his own plan, and I think he just wanted to do it. I think either he wanted to demonstrate the real power structure, that essentially he has checkmated Trump into a taco trade, because he will have to concede to this. He will have to comment on it, or he will actually have to reverse the big bill, and Elon can demonstrate that he's more powerful than the president of the United States. The reason I think Elon's working in isolation, because he has a lot of power himself. But the proof of weapons network, with BlackRock as CEO and all of the JP Morgans and various others that are involved in that network, they gain nothing by drawing attention to this. This is not something they want to draw attention to. In fact, they will fight releasing these files. And obviously, Trump is more connected to the bank. So they're aligned in this. And this does not help Elon in terms of his share price, in terms of his relationships, in terms of his financial interest. There may be a tension that he wanted because of the Palantir bit that we'll cover in a bit. But bankers are the main people that don't want any of this Epstein list to come out, and to create attention of it. JP Morgan has already settled, as I said. this doesn't serve the interest of the people that are in that as well. And they're aligned with that. So this is a problem for his relationship with the power structure and his self-interest. I actually believe that this is Elon deciding against his financial interest to be on the right side of history, because he knows what the end game of this is. He knows the multipolar world order, and he knows that he can squarely blame this on Trump in terms of what comes next. And in years ago, I said, when Trump comes into power again, he will probably be blamed for the fall of the US empire, and he can take his cult with him, saying it was a stitch up. But I don't think, this policy doesn't make America great again. And I think Elon wanted to disassociate himself. And I think it was completely against, I think he's taken on something that is going to be very damaging to him in his personal interest, but it's absolutely the right thing to do long term. So whereas Trump is acting in short term interest, I think Elon's working in long term interest here. So I don't think this was a distraction from the calls that were, the deals that were happening, the big things that were happening in the background between the lack of progress in the China trade war or anything. And I don't think this was engineered or designed. I think this is just not Trump. This is Elon being a wild card. And I don't think, this was coordination or known with Trump in any way, shape or form. I think this is him sticking to what he genuinely believes and thinking long term in general. I welcome your conspiracy theories in the comments, and I welcome as well. I put a poll on YouTube. If you go over to YouTube, there's a poll there in the live chat if you're watching that. And if you're watching the recording, you can see the result of that poll, maybe. But you can vote. Tell me, do you think who's doing the right thing here? Who's acting in the, who's doing, is it Trump doing the right thing here, or is it Musk? And who are you behind? Because on this occasion, I think it's Musk doing the right thing. And I think it's demonstrating that Trump isn't MAGA at all, because this is helping the big corporations at the expense of the American people. And I think on this occasion, Musk is trying to draw in a monetary reform, which is the right thing to do. But it may be some kind of hidden agenda. So in the final part of the macro section, I want to go through how this relates to the whole social credit score things that are being built. So in the big beautiful bill, there is significant budget towards military. It's about printing trillions of dollars. It's about increasing the debt ceiling. It's about rolling over. And it's probably going to be Genius Act and stablecoin bills that provide some of the untapped demand by doing deals with these large military companies. They pay the dollars. It's done via the stablecoin. The stablecoin then buys the treasuries. The American people pay. He gets the higher rates. And you can do more and more deals this way using the big bill as well. But there was an allocation for Palantir. And there was snuck into this 1,000 pages, some seriously damaging stuff based upon what looks very unconstitutional. And we shall see where it goes. And maybe the reason this is trying to rush through, because if there are engineered civil unrest campaigns, this technology needs to be used for the American people, on the American people, after it's been beta tested in the UK and Europe. So Trump focused on the removal of the electric vehicle subsidies, which is billions of dollars that Tesla benefits from. And as a result of that, the Tesla share price, NASDAQ was down about just under 1%. And Tesla share price crashed 15%. And then it led to a 5% rebound today. So net about 10%. And the other things that were in the bill that I've covered previously were all the space exploration, go to Mars stuff, which is the Cold War between Russia, China, and America that will usher in trillions of dollars of corrupt money going towards the military industrial complex, the tech companies, and some of the other companies in this as well. Now, this bill definitely favored Palantir over some of the stuff that Elon wants to do with his social credit score by integrating stablecoins into XAI and X. And so, anyway, this is that's the sinister side. You could then link that to Peter Thiel, and this is some kind of coup. I think that's the MAGA narrative that Trump will take, that there's some kind of coup brewing up here, depending on where it goes. And maybe that's true, maybe that's not true. We'll keep covering it, but those are all the different types of theories that are more plausible based upon following the money. But anyway, Trump is moving full steam ahead with the big, beautiful bill, doubling down on it. And within that is using a database to hand over to Palantir to be weaponized and used against American people in making what China does with their social credit score, which is just for corporations, but this time using it for individuals within America. So this would be leapfrogging the social credit score for the American people. Basically, it's getting permission for Palantir Technologies to have a collaboration between basically Palantir Foundry platform and putting all the data across all the different federal agencies that maybe Elon already scraped through Doge, but then utilizing this into Palantir, which may be what the little rough is about. Now, what does this include? This includes all American health record data. This includes all of America's bank details. This includes all of American social services. And this puts it all into one central hub managed by Palantir, a private corporation that was funded by the CIA deep state, the VC arm through Silicon Valley, that connects right up to the military industrial complex and all the government contracts that are being used around the world. Maybe he would have preferred that data himself with Doge and Starlink and Tesla data. So anyway, there is a genuine struggle around there, around the PayPal mafia, and maybe they all work and connected to the same things. But I think this is Elon in this isolation, working on his own. As I said, this is going to be worse than what China happens. The technology for violence has been beta tested in Gaza, genocide as a service and occupation as a service. And Palantir has a major stake in all of these defense contracts that the big, beautiful bill ushers through. But here's an interesting thing about Palantir. While it has one side, the legacy model under Biden, the neocon model, where it's ushering in genocide as a service, at the same time, Palantir has contracts with the Gulf countries. I mentioned today that it's being used in order to manage people so that you don't have all of the Muslims that are going to Hajj and have them all in one place in one time. Artificial intelligence, there is different types of contracts in the Middle East with the Gulf countries that are being used with Palantir and the Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC, that if you've watched in the geopolitical section, I've said is going to be the important broker in the future vision that BlackRock and others, I believe, are invested in the multipolar world order, which involves U.S. retreating. I'll cover more of that as again, have covered it in previous episodes, but more in part 3. But this is why I've been making those predictions by following the money that Israel is being strategically weakened, GCC will be the new power broker of the region, and US will be retreating. And we're getting the bank-funded model, which will lead to decolonization in the Middle East that requires normalization with Iran, which is while everyone's talking about war with Iran, I believe that there will be a nuclear deal. We haven't had one yet, but I believe that we will see one. Is because Palantir is also invested in the other side with the GCC. So you can exhaust everything that you get with Israel on the genocide as a service, and then you can jump ship over to the GCC and provide the artificial intelligence in the rebuild model as well. And so this is basically a corporate message that signals that money is changing hands. and they're just trying to wipe the money that's left on the table through the Israel genocides as a service, which is disgusting. The humanitarian crisis is a disaster. If I put my humanitarian hat, I'll be speaking very differently. But this is just following the money, and not to say what I want to happen, but to say what I believe is happening. And then they can switch the table, strategically weaken Israel at the opportune moment, and use those Palantir contracts as well for the rebuild as well. And it won't be abandoned, too soon. And so Palantir is kind of one of those companies where you can start to look at their public disclosure records, as I do with many of the military contractors, and it gives you an indication and a gauge of what the proof of weapons network is doing and when they're going to abandon Israel as those contracts ratchet up with the GCC and ratchet down with Israel. So I'll cover more of that into the future as I watch that as well. But they have their foot in basically both sides, the technology side and the military industrial complex. The tech is really heavily aligned with the financial side and the banks at the moment. And they've created that more profitable model for the Middle East that I've covered in the geopolitical section. And I'll cover a bit more today in terms of what's happened today. So this is an example of how the same company can fund essentially both sides of a war, or have contracts with both sides of the war, which has always been the strategic tension model. But this is a different version of that when the genocide is going to be ending. Okay, let's see what else we got. So I think, anyway, in summary, that's why we had this drama. And I could buy into the conspiracy theories, and I'd like you in the comment section below to tell me what your theory is. But I actually believe that this was Elon working on his own. There is a slight interest around the Palantir contract and that whole side. But I think he wanted to actually genuinely push Trump into a bind of doing what's right by the American people, knowing that the finance people won't allow him to do that, so that Trump gets thrown under the bus and long-term Elon gets to protect his reputation. But this is going to cost him in the short term. It cost him share price. It cost him relationships with banks. And it will cost him, basically, he is doing the Make America Great Again. And if he does end up creating a political party, that is the party that will usher in a monetary reform and actually make that change. So in this particular occasion, I know Elon's background, but this is where I personally, and I'd like to see your vote in the poll on YouTube, I'm on Team Elon for this occasion. I don't do cults. I don't say I love Trump and therefore whenever he does something good or bad, I just join the cult. We just talk about policies. And that's why, these are the cults that drive people into defending the indefensible and ending up defending things like Epstein lists and various other constituencies and various other things. And so we shall watch this space. But I think it perfectly highlights the content that I've always been covered in the macro section, and how the proof of weapons network works and how the debt-based Ponzi scheme works. And now we're getting a power structure within America where Trump is rolling over the debt-based Ponzi scheme for the banks, and Elon is going against the banks by looking at a monetary reform rather than ushering in business as usual by having real stuff that would actually redistribute wealth away from Wall Street and over to Main Street if it actually happened. And so that's what Elon's doing. And so I'm on Team Elon for this one, but I think Team Trump will win. But I think it will work for Team Elon in the future and his reputation, even though it will cost him short term. And that's how sometimes you can do stuff, because sometimes doing what's right is the right thing to do, even when it costs you money short term. And this is the problem with the construct of the corporations that control America. It's all designed around short-term thinking. And now anything long-term that benefits the state is not factored into the design and the game theory. That's why I follow the money. And that's why you don't get any actions that help the people. And that's why I need you to be prepared and go back to part 1 if you didn't watch it, and make sure that you're protecting yourself in this world of Bitcoin, AI, and CBDCs, and you're boycotting the Fed with Bitcoin and owning Bitcoin in self-custody to boycott BlackRock so that you own sovereign wealth and you can protect yourself in this transition. Right, so we're going to move into part 3 now. In part 3, I'm going to be doing This Week in Geopolitics. It will build off everything we covered in part 1 and part 2. But do me a favor. I'm trying to get to 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. We are almost there. We have been unshadow banned and we've got a lot more subscribers. So please, if you're watching this and you're not subscribed, head over to YouTube, hit the bell symbol, hit all, and while you're there, vote on the poll and let us know. Are you on team who's doing the right thing? Are you on team Trump or team Elon on this occasion? Put a comment there as well. Let me know your thoughts as well and your theory around what's happening. I think this is fluid and we will analyze it as we progress, but this is my speculation. And if you are not on Rumble, head over there and follow me there in case YouTube shuts me down. Because once we get to 100,000, they'll do a review on my channel. And in case Rumble shuts me down, head over to simondixon.com. Make sure you got to log into the Bitcoin Hard Talk free membership portal. And we give you additional stuff over there that you can't get anywhere else by having a login. And then you're on my newsletter. And I'll update you every single week and make sure you're up to date. Follow me on X. I'm going to take some water and then we're going to jump right into part 3 of Bitcoin Hard Talk, episode 84, Elon, Trump, Epstein, what's real? What is real? Put in the comment below.